Warhammer 3 is the culmination of nearly 8 years of Total War games, and in that time, the number of factions has steadily risen to a staggering 24. Each of them have their own mechanics and unit rosters, but I think it's safe to say that some factions are simply a lot better than others. Today, let's count down the top 10 factions that need a rework, right after I tell you about Holy and their line of iced tea drink powders, faster than Skarsnik can beat some Nurglings. And he's off. By now, you've probably heard all about Holy and their line of energy drink powders, but did you know they also have a range of iced teas? There's a wide array of flavours to choose from, but my favourite has to be acai and hibiscus. No matter which flavour you go for, all of them follow the 4 Holy pillars. Say it with me, guys. 1. Taste is king, so you know all of these products have been perfected to bring you the best taste possible. 2. No bullshit. All of their products are free of sugar, taurine, and all that other crap that traditional energy drinks are rammed full of. 3. They're good for you, so as well as enjoying a tasty drink, you can feel good about your choices with only 20 calories per serving. And finally, 4. They're also good for the planet, saving 90% of packaging waste against traditional energy drinks, not to mention the CO2. Iced tea in particular is low in caffeine for those of the sensitive type like myself, full of antioxidants, high in fiber, and generally keeps you working in tip-top condition all day long. So if you'd like to check out Holy Iced Tea or any of their other lines, check out the link in the description and use code Colonel5 for £5 off your first order, or just code Colonel for 10% off any order. One last thank you to Holy for partnering with the channel, and now let's see how Skarsnik is getting on. And he's done. Now, let's get into the list. Kicking off the list with Slesh, and of all the factions here today, they're the one which needs a rework the least. Now I know that's kind of obvious given their placement, but I just mean that the gap between them and number 9 is pretty large, and they're really alright but could just do with a little bit of extra love. So at the moment, Slesh has only one faction in Nakara, and their mechanics are all about seduction and influence. They're not really that bad, and I actually really like their ability to steal units before battle. However, the rest of it just feels very convoluted. Building up seductive influence and imparting the gifts of Slesh is something you have to do, as well as playing a normal campaign instead of both working in tandem. You have to intentionally beat armies, but leave them living or send heroes out to perform busy work instead of the usual battle till they're dead and take their lands. Now it does technically work, but personally it's never felt intuitive and gets in the way of normal gameplay. Plus, you also have to take into account that once you do build up all this influence and make a faction into your vassal, what's the point? Vassals suck in Warhammer 3, which is a separate issue in itself, but why would you go to all this trouble of making a faction your vassal instead of just taking their lands for yourself? It only makes sense to do this against factions living in uninhabitable areas for yourself, and even then, it's a bit of a stretch. It would be nice to see this seduction more integrated into the gameplay because while it is unique, it's not really all that fun or intuitive to use. Maybe in a Slesh DLC we can get a vassal rework alongside it to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, but I'm not going to hold out too much hope. Honestly, the seduction of vassals aside, I don't think Slesh are all that bad. In battle, I don't really have any complaints. It's just a shame their main mechanic is a pain in the ass to use, and even if you do manage it, it's not really worth it anyway. Coming in 9th place, we have the Dwarves, and believe it or not, they've actually had 2 mini reworks, but I'm still of the belief that they need another proper one. To be fair, the first 2 were very minor tweaks to what they already had, so they haven't really had a real gut and remodel like they actually need. All they have is the Grudges system and the Forge, which is just item crafting. Yes, they were one of the first factions to get item crafting, but it's a bit more common now, so it doesn't really make them stand out as a faction. As for the Grudges mechanic, at first it was too punishing, causing a losing campaign to spiral to its doom, and now it's a nothing mechanic where you get bonuses no matter what's happening, so why worry? Somehow they shifted it from too impactful and punishing to not having any impact or consequence whatsoever, and I'm not sure which is worse. In my opinion, it should be punishing, but the rewards for staying on top of it should be greater, similar to the food mechanic from the Skaven. Honestly, if they just stole that exact mechanic but made it grudge-based, it'd be kind of a good change. The Slayers are nice and all, but Slayers kinda suck, so this needs to change too. Crafting is okay, but I'd like to see more creative options for what you can craft. The introduction of runes was a good change, but going beyond that, it would be cool to see them have even more impact like Grom's Cauldron. Imagine giving a rune some ranges, giving them explosive arrows, suddenly opening the door to all kinds of creativity and fun, which is, you know, the point of video games. And you've got to remember that this game is primarily played against AI, so I believe focusing on fun over balance is the way to go. Sure, if everyone was as cracked as the Changeling, where you can literally never lose, the game would be boring. But you're telling me that gyro bombers that drop napalm wouldn't be the sickest thing you've ever seen? You liar. The Dowie don't need big or numerous changes, they just need a little bit of spice to bring them up to the next level. Coming in 8th place, we have Brettonia. Now, this one might just be me, but I really think Brettonia have some of the most anti-fun mechanics in the game. The peasant economy, I'm sure it makes lore sense. I don't really care about lore, as some of you may know, but punishing my economy for fielding armies is pretty punishing when I already get punished by fielding armies, you know, from upkeep. The upkeep reductions are nice and all, but it just feels like needless limitations to put you there to slow your growth. Speaking of slowing you down, vows are one of my least favourite mechanics in the entire game. Having to choose and complete side quests with different options for each new lord I recruit would be fun if I was playing Diablo, but in a Total War game it's just forcing me to play in a convoluted way so I can progress. But of course, let me send my lord to win a battle at sea so he's allowed to use this elite unit and actually be a viable army without bankrupting me. Chivalry isn't bad, but it's also not really all that great. I don't mind the roleplay of having to be an honourable lord, but I kind of wish that it was something a bit more like Malice's possession mechanic, where my actions move my honour level up or down, and depending on which side I choose, my faction changes to either be better or worse at different things. Wouldn't it be cool if I was able to play as an honourless, outcast Brettonian lord at war with his countrymen, with massive stat buffs to him and his units, but instead it's just a bar that slowly fills up over the course of the game, and eventually you can skip vows and get the Green Knight. Yeah, your reward for completing this mechanic is skipping another annoying mechanic. If that doesn't tell you how annoying this shit is, I don't know what will. Like I said, this one might just be me because I don't really vibe with Brettonia personally, but I think all of their mechanics aren't very fun and can use some work. If I had to pick just one thing, it'd probably be Chivalry for RP reasons, but I doubt Games Workshop would ever allow what I'm saying, so I can dream. Next up we have the Empire, and I think this is one that pretty much everyone is going to agree with. Now, they actually had their big rework alongside the Hunter of the Beast all those years ago, and honestly it's one of the best reworks we've ever gotten. However, it has kind of aged like milk in the sun. These days, uniting the Empire is harder than a FromSoft game. Ever since Festus got added, you just lose Imperial authority constantly, and that just sends your game into a death spiral. Add on the fact that even without this, uniting the Empire is harder than ever with all the new threats working to take it down, and they're in desperate need of some changes since this is really all they have. Now hold your comment, I'm not saying we need to stop summoning the elect counts, we just need to change how we do it to keep things fun. Honestly, just removing that you lose authority if a faction gets destroyed would be a great step, but we can probably do a bit more than that. It should feel more like Karl is the Emperor, because right now he just seems like a guy trying to herd a bunch of kittens to stand still long enough for him to take a photo, but instead of kittens, it's Empire factions, and instead of taking a photo, it's live long enough to be confederated. I can see a mechanic where he makes decisions that affect the entire region and direct the focus of his allies a lot more. There's some of this now, but it's really just number tweaking. I'm talking about an event where Festus and Norka are going to attack at the same time, and you have to decide where to focus your efforts. This could maybe give you a quest with a time limit, and upon completion, you get a big fealty boost with everyone involved. Maybe you could even have some sort of council mechanic where the elect counts meet once every 25 turns and decide on a focus. Just something to make it feel more like Karl is ruling the Empire instead of herding cats. The bonuses for each count are fine, and the end goal of total confederation makes sense. It just needs some tweaking to make it a little bit more fun and bring it up to date. Coming to number 6, we have the Lizardmen. Now, depending on what legendary lord you're playing as, you're either going to agree with me here or think I'm absolutely insane. The Lizards have had some of the most DLCs of any faction and have a truly massive unit roster. However, if you're playing as one of the base lords like Mazdamundi or Kroq-Gar, your campaign just feels the tiniest bit underdeveloped. The base mechanics for their faction are the Geomantic Web and the Blessed Spawnings, and with thousands of hours between Warhammer 2 and 3, I'm also going to struggle to explain what either do without looking it up, and I definitely can't say that they're fun. Blessed Spawnings are just enhanced units you can recruit if you complete these random missions that pop up every now and then. It's pretty basic and it doesn't really constitute a real mechanic. The Geomantic Web, however, is one of the most overcomplicated mechanics in the game for so little reward. The general idea is that all settlements are linked, and depending on how strong the web is, your commandments get stronger or weaker effects. The problem is, to get to full power takes forever, and the rewards hardly are worth the Goliath cost and time sink. Now I think there probably is a way to make this work a lot better and be fun, and my best go at it is as follows. Scrap the buildings, or at least don't rely on them as the only way to enhance the web's power. Why not just make it so that each settlement's power is determined by how many allied settlements it's adjacent to? So if your faction is surrounded by allied or occupied lands, the power is much higher. Your commandments are stronger, and your stores of Blessed Spawnings replenish faster. Yeah, why not combine that boring missions mechanic into this to give it a bit more life? Make it like the Warriors of Chaos, where the stronger the web is, the more units you can recruit and the more elite they are. Don't replace their recruitment entirely, but offer it as an alternative option, or maybe something to get the most elite units like the Dread Saurian. You can keep the web buildings if you really want access to the most elite rewards, but just make all but the highest level accessible through normal gameplay. I know this seems like I'm just dumbing it down, but honestly this mechanic just absolutely sucks, so why not make it easier to use and it'll end up more fun by default. Coming to the halfway point, we have the Demons of Chaos. Now I've got to come clean. I've hardly touched the Demons of Chaos since way back at the start of Warhammer 3, and it's really for one reason. The only mechanic this faction has is Daniel the Demon. Granted, he's quite an in-depth mechanic, but that's all there is. As they gather glory for the Chaos Gods, you unlock different parts to design a demon, some new units, and the occasional watered-down mechanic from other monogod factions. Outside of himself, he doesn't really have a mechanic that's his own. Also, Be'lakor should be a legendary lord for this faction, but that ship has sailed, so whatever at this point. So, to make Daniel feel like a proper faction, I suggest two things. The first one is the easiest. Make this demon building into a thing for more lords. Be'lakor can literally make generic versions of Daniel, so why can't he? He is him. Once he has them, let them swap out body parts just like he can. You could make it so that they share a parts pool similar to items to keep things balanced, but still, this way you could make more of a use of the mechanic that's already there, because by the time you reach the late game, you're done building the demon, so have literally no mechanics at all to play with. This way you can keep making new demons all game long. As well as this, he just needs something else. I'm not exactly sure what. I mean, just look at his bottom right. This man has nothing. At least give him a research tree to scroll through for 3 hours to find the right thing. Even if it was something as simple as the Tribal Confederation mechanic from Norka, where he can absorb Chaos factions whose leaders he beats, it kind of makes sense for him being the demon of all chaos. I don't know, just give my boy something else, because as it stands, he's just a Build-A-Bear with nothing else going on. Coming in 4th place, we have the Ogre Kingdoms. And oh man, the curse of the launch DLC strikes again, almost like it's not a good business decision. Now, I don't think the Ogres are quite as bad as the Warriors of Chaos were on launch. I mean, they're still pretty sucky to play in almost every aspect, don't get me wrong. Just almost every mechanic they have kinda sucks. Big names limit you to just one when Grease's canonically correct name is 45 minutes of speed reading long. Literally, just make it so you can collect a massive list over the course of the game and equip another one every 5 levels or something. Boom, better already. Contracts are just random quests with extra steps. Make them actually big contracts with big rewards. Instead of fighting lizardmen 5 times for 600 gold, how about instead you have to take out this particular legendary lord and their faction for 10,000 gold, as well as this powerful item, but if someone beats you to it, you're shit out of luck. Just increase the scale of both the challenge and the reward to make them feel like proper work, but also worth the effort. Meat is whatever. The bonuses from offering to the Great Maw are fine, but not really something I'd be upset if I forgot about. Maybe instead a tree of increasingly powerful but expensive rewards that are a one-time purchase would be a bit more fun. Hell, maybe even just copying Grom's cauldron mechanic with an ogre twist. It'd be fine by me. Maybe you have a big stew that you fill up with meat, and the more you collect, the more bonuses you unlock for your faction. Just add a bit more impact to make it worth remembering. And lastly, camps. Capacity aside, I think these are alright in theory, but it's really just being a horde faction with extra steps. I think just give them the ability to get up and move, it'd make them feel a lot more interactive, and it means you don't have to keep trudging back to your camp whenever you need new units. Make it so it takes a turn or two to set up camp and then the same to pack up and move. That way it's not overpowered like, traditional horde like the Beastmen, unique to the ogres, and it still keeps the nomadic mercenary theme going nicely. Ironically enough, the bones of a good faction are here, they just lack the meat to make them really great to play as. Coming in 3rd place, we have Nurgle. It's funny that this is the 4th launch Warhammer 3 faction on the list. It's almost like the game was rushed out or something. Anyway, Nurgle is by far the worst of the launch factions, and it's because he's not just unfun to play, he's borderline impossible to play properly. Now, he's extremely unique, but instead of being like a shiny Pokemon, he's a teapot made out of cotton wool. Unique, yes, but also entirely useless. Now, we've talked at length on Old Grumblers about what we think a Nurgle rework should look like, so I'd encourage you to check that out if you want a more discussion-based version, but I'm going to give you my take. So first up, the easy fix, the plagues. As they are, they're fine, but it's basically just stat effects that are good for you and bad for enemies. Make units better, settlements grow faster, whatever, not all that exciting. The more plagues you make and spread, the more symptoms you unlock, but they never get crazy. How about just turning up to 11 and making those late game symptoms absolutely cracked? I know I keep bringing it up, but Grom's Cauldron is basically this mechanic but better, so just copy that a little bit. Combinations of symptoms make super plagues with crazy effects like Nurglings exploding on death and massive damage to all nearby units. Enemy units affected turn into a unit of plague-ridden when they're killed. Unclean ones passively drain the health of nearby enemies to heal themselves. Just go balls to the wall and make them crazy with an equally crazy price tag. It's campaign mode against AI like 99.9% of the time. We want to feel a little bit overpowered later on, and Nurgle just want to be fun. Next up, the cyclical buildings. Honestly, this is a really cool and unique idea, and it sucks quite literally a metric gallon of asshole. The easiest fix for this one is obviously to remove it completely, but in interest of keeping something unique, just make it so the cycles don't add capacity, they just reduce recruitment time for units. So the Garden of Blight instantly makes recruiting unclean ones possible, but it takes like 10 turns and costs a ton of gold. Once it cycles up to the top level, the time and cost are basically nothing, and then it goes back to 0, etc, etc. Oh, and just scrap the recruitment at low HP thing. It sucks and it just slows down an already slow campaign. If you wanted to preserve unique recruitment, add on to buildings that they also increase the number you can recruit at once. So the Garden lets you recruit 1 unclean one at once at level 1, and then say 3 at max level. The entire cyclical and recruitment system kinda sucks, so totally removing it and doing something new would be the easiest solution, but with the spaghetti code, these tweaks are probably the closest you can get to getting something playable. Coming in 2nd place, we have the vampire counts. I've actually made an entire video about how to rework the vampire counts, but I'll go over the spark notes here. The vampire counts have seen the least amount of love since their launch, all the way back in Warhammer 1. They've had 1 DLC, and the rework they got was 1 extra mechanic, and that's it. The bloodlines. They're actually alright, so honestly not really much change there other than souping up a couple of the less exciting effects. I also think giving more bloodlines some unique units would be fun, but aside from that, they're okay. Now, Raising Dead I have much more complicated feelings about. It's absolutely not a bad mechanic. In fact, I would say it's one of the strongest in the game. What it is, however, is just a little bit boring. All you can raise is your own regular units when the battle you're drawing from may not have even featured humans. I'll cut to the chase and say that I want vampires to be able to raise undead versions of units they beat in battle. You could do this just like they raise dead now, but instead of just their units, occasionally you'll find something else like an undead mammoth, zombie crossbows, or a skeletal carnosaur. Or you could do it just like Slanesh's seduction mechanic but post-battle. You have a limited budget and can raise dead units from a hostile army post-battle. No matter how it's done, just give me more unit variety. If these are the most powerful necromancers in the world, then surely they can use the dead of their enemies against them. Is that the entire point of undead? I really don't think they need that much else aside from just that, but if I was to really push the boat out, then rework their corruption would probably be a good idea. Basically, all of the corruption has some interesting effects, but undead is just attrition and control. Maybe higher levels can give armies uses of raised dead in battle similar to Skaven. Maybe it can increase the post-battle raised dead budget, just something to make it stand out a little bit more. I love the vampire counts, they're my favourite faction in the entire game. I just want them to be as fun and cool as I know they can be. And coming in first place, could it really be any other faction than the one which I think CA has actually forgotten exists? Norka. I mean, the recent update to Shadows of Change added a Frostworm to Kislev. Now, I swear I've heard that name somewhere before. JK was always called a Chaos Frost Dragon. What level of gaslighting is this? In all seriousness, Norka launched really strong, but since hitting Warhammer 3, they have been steadily falling their way to the bottom of every tier list, mainly through neglect. Their allegiance to the Dark Gods is okay and sets them apart from other chaotic factions, but the rewards hardly match the effort, and it's not particularly engaging to fill up these bars. I mean, it's just a worse version of Daniel's Chaos bars, and we've already said how basic he is. I think you could keep this as is, but up the reward to make it stronger. Stop it from locking you out of all of them upon completing one, because that's just lame, and make filling bars a lot more engaging. Maybe when you raise settlements, you erect an effigy to these gods, which provides points per turn as long as it stands, meaning you now have to defend territory, even if you don't settle there. The concept of the monster hunts is pretty good on the off chance that they actually work. If this mechanic functions correctly, just add a few more hunts, allow them to tame a few more monsters from some Warhammer 3 factions, and I'd be all for it. With all the chaos in game, surely some demon hunts should be on the agenda. Maybe not to tame, but some cool items and buffs to beating them. Now, I love the idea of the mechanic where they unlock certain techs by taking capital settlements, so no complaints here, other than up rewards to make it more worth it. Maybe some unique items or units, as well as some buffs to just spice things up, especially against more monstrous factions. Maybe that final greenskin tech unlocks a monster hunt of a giant spider that can then be tamed. It's kinda similar to the ogres that the foundations are here, but they need a massive amount of fleshing out. Norka right now are just not all that fun to play as, and desperately need a rework to bring them back into the fold. But with that, we finish this list. Let me know if you think any other factions need a rework in the comments below, or what you'd like to see changed in any of these factions. Like, subscribe, and if you want to see more Warhammer 3 rework discussion, then check out this episode of the Old Grumblers podcast to see me, Monsters, Fred, and special guest Cody Bonds talk about what factions we'd most like to see changed.